Good morning, everyone. My name is Maureen Scallon-Failer. I am president of the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce, and I would like to welcome all of you here this morning for what I feel is a very important project, not only as it relates to the City of Bloomington, but to the area, the South Metro area as a whole. We have a great panel here this morning, and I personally want to thank Steve, Christina, Tim, and Glenn for taking the time this morning to come and spend with the Chamber to really give us what the plan is from a local and regional level. So thank you very much for coming and spending some time with us this morning. I would like to announce that this is a forum that is put on by our Public Affairs Committee. We do have several of our committee members here, so if you could just please raise your hand. We have Robert Freeman, we have Larry Lee, we have Ken Vinge, and Wayne, thank you so much and for supporting public affairs. I would now like to turn it over to our moderator, our very distinguished moderator, Will Schroer. He really has been instrumental on transit for the Chamber. That has been a #1 priority for the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, which we are an affiliate of. And Will, you have done tremendous work for the organization. You have set the stage for us to continue. And I don't think we would be here today overall as it relates to transit without all your guidance and help. So I'd like to turn it over to Will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maureen. Well, I didn't expect all of that. I'm only going over to St. Paul, so not very far, and I'll still be here. And my role here this morning is really very minimal. You're interested in what our guests have to say, so I will just briefly move them along, and then I'll help organize the questions and point to people, and conceivably I may exercise the moderator's prerogative and ask a pointed question if I think someone else isn't doing so. We're going to start with Christina Morrison to give us the Metro Transit's proposed plan and approach to this vital project. Then we'll hear from the city, and then we'll come back to Met Council Council Member Steve Elkins to give us the sort of the broader perspective. And then I think the main goal is to really have a conversation around this. So without further ado, Christina.
Well, thanks for having us. I'm Christina Morrison. I'm with Metro Transit's BRT, Bus Rapid Transit Project Office. Bus Rapid Transit is an area of growth for Metro Transit. So we're embarking on a bunch of different projects. One of our main projects right now is the Metro Orange Line that comes to this area. So I want to start really with kind of the regional picture. This is a map of our metro system. Let's see if I can, okay, I have a pointer. And this obviously is the orange line. Don't worry, we'll zoom in. I can't see it either. But you can kind of see how the orange line fits in with sort of the entire package so that people can not only get to this area, but also get from this area to get to jobs across the region. So we started things off with the blue line, the Hiawatha line, in 2004. We have added commuter rail with North Star. Last year we opened the region's first bus rapid transit line on Cedar Avenue in Eagan and Apple Valley, the red line. June 14th we're opening the green line Central Corridor to St. Paul. And then Southwest LRT, which will be the green line extension, it is currently in engineering. And then the orange line sort of falling into place within the next 5 years or so. So you can kind of see how relatively quickly in 10 to 15 years, maybe not as quickly as we all want, but we've started to build this kind of network of frequent, reliable kind of transit ways. And these, I should just point out on the right, these are some images of our branding. So the idea is that whether it's a bus or a train, you have a consistent branding, consistent message for people that they can go to the system. They don't need a schedule. They know that there's going to be a bus or a train every 10 to 15 minutes. So it starts to just make it a little bit easier to choose transit as a choice. So looking at the orange line specifically, we're looking at 11 stations between Minneapolis, Richfield, Bloomington, and connecting actually down to Burnsville. we are looking at all-day frequent bi-directional service. So very much like the light rail, you should be able to walk up to a platform, expect that there's going to be a bus or a train, or a bus, sorry, not a train. And one of the things that will help you know that is that we'll have real-time information on the platform. So there will be a sign that says, you know, next bus, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, so it kind of counts down and gives you that confidence that you know that your bus is on time, especially with some of the weather we've had this year. We know that that's really important. We also are making a lot of accessibility improvements. So some of our stations today aren't fully accessible, and we know that that's a growing issue as we try to get really transit to reach all audiences. We're looking at a new park and ride in the vicinity of American Boulevard. We have a very popular park and ride over here at South Bloomington Transit Center, just across the street. It's completely full. So we're looking at, as part of this project, expanding our parking capacity. And 2019, as I mentioned, is kind of our year of opening. So this is the area I want to focus on today. I think there's been a lot of discussion and interest in kind of the area between 76th Street and Richfield and American Boulevard. So we're really going to zoom in now and talk a little bit about that. So we started our planning, this phase of our planning. There's been previous work done on the interchange, but in 2013 we started by sort of plugging into MnDOT's process for the 494-35W interchange. And what they're doing is looking at kind of the broader interchange layout, what the phasing will be, how the local ramps will connect, things like that. And so we really found that that was a good opportunity to insert, to talk about how we insert a transit station into this area in a more coordinated way. And so the American Boulevard station has been part of the 494 discussion. It's also part of the Orange Line as a whole. So when we started looking at this area, I think probably for years, decades maybe, it's always been assumed that the station would be in the center of 35W. And if you've driven on 35W north through the 46th Street area, you'll know that there's a station that was built there as part of the Crosstown Commons project. And so that was sort of an opportunity. The street was being opened up and replaced, and to drop a station in the center and reconfigure it around. And so that has always really been the vision for American Boulevard. Once we started looking really in detail this year, starting about last February, we compared kind of this option to what we're doing today, which is shown in red. We come up and around, we go up Penn through all those traffic lights, and we come down, and we have a park and ride at Best Buy today, at Knox Avenue Park and Ride, and then we get back on and go north to Richfield and Minneapolis. And this is the only place that we do that really in the current route, the Route 535, which is sort of our precursor to BRT. And the reason we do that is because this area has such tremendous ridership. Both people using the park and ride and people walking up to these destinations and coming from a lot of the housing up in Richfield, and then obviously Best Buy being a huge draw for people coming south, north and south from Minneapolis and from the Burnsville area. And then all the retail and commercial destinations within Southtown. So we started talking about, what if we could have both? What if we could have sort of the speed of this very direct route, but the front door access of something that sort of mimics what we do today. And so we started looking at an alternative that kind of bisects this area. And in Richfield, if you've driven down this little cul-de-sac, this is near Dick's Sporting Goods. You'll know that this is a dead end here at 494. This is, Knox Avenue is a public street here, but here this is private property. It belongs to KA, Southtown property. So there's obviously a huge piece here, a huge assumption that we're talking about when we say Knox Avenue, that Knox Avenue could be extended and it would be an underpass at 494. But once you start thinking about that, and this is kind of one of those ideas that we put on the table, we wanted to really study it, and we were kind of surprised by the results. So obviously the most direct route, the route that keeps the bus in the freeway, is going to have the best travel time. But when we started looking at other things, access to destinations, how people connect to local bus service to get to where they're going. How we operate transit in this area. So one of the big challenges that we have is merging from the center to the side on 35W. And this really eliminates that because it keeps us on the side. If you look here, we're on the side at 98th Street coming out of the transit center. We come up here to 82nd, and then we're on the bus shoulder again up to 66th, which is also on the shoulder. So we started looking at, can you make this merge from the center to 66th Street? And the answer from our street operations was no. They said, well, you can just cut out the station at 66th Street. And you're like, oh, okay. So as you start to think about this station's role, it's really critical, I think, to think about the destinations and also how the Orange Line is going to operate long term. We also looked really closely at bus service and transfers. So I don't have our existing bus routes on here, but you can imagine that people want to get from 76th to American and vice versa. And so we sort of bend bus routes back and forth throughout this area to make that connection. This actually kind of straightens out the grid and allows us to run better service on 76th Street and better service on American because now we don't have to sort of bend everything down to a station here. And that saves us about a bus a day. So there's real operating costs that are part of that. Bike and pedestrian connections. One of the things that we've assumed as part of this study is at a minimum having a sidewalk and a trail connection to help people get between these two areas. If you're working at Best Buy, you can come down and have lunch at Southtown, do some shopping. So we think that that's an important part of this concept. And then cost estimates. When we started looking at the cost of opening up a freeway, widening it 65 or 70 feet, the costs are considerable, not just for changing the shape of the main line, but also for redoing the access sort of around that main line, redoing bridge work. Knox Avenue, the costs are much more focused in this area, looking at the underpass with the bridging on 494, as well as obviously the acquisition of the private property here. But this is all at grade, so we're building stations that are much more, they're much less capital intensive rather than a two-story station in the middle of the freeway. So the costs are actually similar. Knox Avenue is a little bit less in the cost estimates, but they're just very different sort of allocation of the costs. And I won't get too far into this because I know the city will talk more about kind of development, but we're really conscious at Metro Transit of trying to bring transit to where people are and where people want to go. And I think with the Penn American planning, it's a good opportunity to kind of align sort of what we're doing and to think about this in a more integrated way. And so Knox Avenue brings us a little bit closer to the heart of Penn American. And I'll let you guys talk more about development. But so this is kind of where we're at today. Looking at this Knox Avenue alignment, we're proposing two stations, one on the Bloomington side, one on the Richfield side, and that we would explore these areas for a park and ride facility. Like I said, maybe about 500 cars is what we're looking at, and using a lot of the basic sort of existing infrastructure. And these on the right side are just kind of ideas of what a Knox Avenue station could look like. So up here, this is the Chicago Lake Transit Center. This is a Red Line station, a Metro Red Line station on Cedar Avenue in Apple Valley. And this is actually a BRT station in Cleveland. I was like, oh, a picture with snow. Nobody ever takes pictures. They all look like this. But Cleveland has a relatively new BRT system that sort of becoming a model for the way it's emulating rail and improving ridership. So lots of different kind of design options. That's the sort of thing we'll be looking at in the next year or so. And I think that's all. So we'll take questions, I think, after.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that.
I'm Tim Bussing, council member here in the City of Bloomington, and happy to be here. For the record, this year during Lent, I'm giving up winter. I've decided that's what I'm giving up. Was going to give up swearing, but honestly didn't even make it halfway here this morning and had missed there. We're getting it. There we go. Back in college, my housemates and I, every year for Lent, we would give up cheap beer. No more of the cheap stuff. And my mom didn't find that as amusing as what we did, so we decided to back off on that a little bit. But again, thank you all for being here. Do really appreciate it. It's an important discussion, and I'm glad you're here to take part in it. My job this morning is to kind of give the big picture look at things, and we'll start pretty high on with a look, and then kind of winnow down to the Penn American District. And so as we go through this, I hope jot down questions, because as I said, I'd like to continue the discussion as we move along here. And this is how high I'm going to start. I'm going to actually start with the mission statement for the City of Bloomington. And part of Bloomington's mission, as you can see that we have underlined, to build and renew community. Build and renew community. I mean, we have, everyone has seen, you've seen across the metropolitan area, cities that don't actively plan for the future and for renewing themselves tend to decline. And I think that's, you can see many, many examples across the metro area, across Minnesota, across the country, and that's the case. So that's how high we are starting, is with our mission statement. And I'm also going to start with a figure from our comp plan, our Imagine Bloomington 2025 plan. This it summarizes a few of Bloomington's key strategic directions, and as we build and renew the community. And there are two strategic directions that I really want you to pay attention to, because they're very germane to our discussion today. The first is up here: encourage transit ways, and then guide most growth to key growth nodes. So encourage transit ways. Obviously, the transit ways that were identified in this plan, we're halfway there. We have the red line, BRT, that was identified, as well as the blue line, or the Hiawatha line, LRT. In the future, we have the American Boulevard arterial bus rapid transit and the Orange Line bus rapid transit. So we're about halfway there in terms of encouraging transit ways. Guide most growth to the key growth nodes. Bloomington has identified 3 specific areas that will probably, that over the next 20 years will be the majority of the growth within the City of Bloomington. It's obviously our South Loop District, the Penn American District, and the Normandale Lakes District. And you'll notice those 3 districts are served by significant transportation investments, either past or potential future transportation investments. Certainly in the South Loop, by the airport, by the freeways, by the LRT, an incredible investment there. But definitely as we make your way west, there are significant investments in each of those specified growth nodes within the City of Bloomington. This lonely looking slide is actually the freeways that serve the City of Bloomington. Take everything else out, that's what the freeways look like. And I first looked at this and thought it was a lonely little slide, but actually it kind of shows it really well, because it almost looks like veins carrying blood, and that actually is the truth. It is very important, and has always been very important to Bloomington, are the 4 freeways that serve Bloomington, whether it's 169, 494, 35W, or Cedar Avenue. And Bloomington, obviously, has been blessed by the proximity to those freeways, and has really benefited from it, and the significant federal and state investment that has been made in those roadways. And Bloomington's early leaders, and Councilmember Elkins, probably not as early, but he's certainly in that list of folks, saw the benefits and the importance of those roadways and how to take advantage of them. In a lot of cities, you'll see single-family homes lining the freeways. Bloomington specifically zoned most of this area as commercial development, and it certainly paid off. The proactive planning allowed the city to capture a lot of the transportation investment. It's the reason that the Bloomington tax base is as diverse and as successful as it is today. So it's long-range planning. It's folks who were on the city council long before I was, looking at this in such a way that could make a difference. Another huge investment is obviously Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. An enormous investment from both the federal and state governments, and enormous benefit to have an international airport right at our doorstep is something that we really can't overstate, just the importance of it. And again, Bloomington leaders were smart enough to take advantage of this investment. The South Loop District, which is just to the south of the airport in the Mall of America, in this area here, it was planned and it was zoned and it was looked at in such a way to maximize this investment in the airport. Bloomington has an enormous hospitality industry, in part because of the planning that went on in this area and its proximity to the airport. You think about all of the restaurants, the hotels, the destinations in Bloomington that are close proximity to the airport. Now think about those compared to what you see in Richfield and Minneapolis. There's no comparison. Bloomington leaders long ago made that decision that that was the way to invest and to leverage that federal investment, and the plans have certainly paid off over the years. Another example is the LRT investment. Bloomington, we like to say that Bloomington is one of the 2 cities in the state of Minnesota right now that actually are served by LRT. And people tend to forget about that. They think of the LRT as Minneapolis serving, but comes all the way to the Mall of America. And as a reminder, that was a 4-3 vote on the Bloomington City Council years ago. That was a contentious issue, whether or not to bring LRT all the way to the Mall of America. And I think it would be tough to argue now that that was a very to look at it now, it was a no-brainer. It was certainly the decision that should have been made, but that was a contentious decision and a contentious argument on the City Council for a long while. Again, federal, state funding, enormous investment, no city money involved, and it's certainly paying off. The city looked at it again as an investment and a way to plan around and something to leverage to the highest benefit, and it is paying off. The City Council, not too long ago, we approved 840 units of Leonard apartments that are very close to Bloomington Central Station. They will start construction on, I believe, half of those later this summer. We also have Bloomington Central Station. McGuff has received approval to build this 302-room hotel at Bloomington Central Station. It's going to start later this year. And even a step back, the Reflections, which were condos built close to Bloomington Central Station and came online just as the condo market kind of fell off the table. And it's been impressive how these condos have sold and how successful it has been, in large part, I think, because of their relationship, their proximity to the LRT service that comes through the area. It does make a difference. Wherever you go, Chicago, New York, Washington, or for that matter, between Minneapolis and St. Paul, where transit development is taking place, retail and residential development follows. If you've traveled at all on University Avenue between Minneapolis and St. Paul, the change is startling. The amount of change in anticipation of the Green Line LRT is startling and impressive. The investment is certainly following the transit as it has in the past, and really as it will certainly in the future. So now we get to the Orange Line, BRT, and it's another significant transportation investment that's going to benefit Bloomington. And just like the freeways and the airport and the Blue Line LRT, the Orange Line BRT is going to attract development, and we have to be ready for it. But in addition to attracting development, it's going to improve mobility for Bloomington residents. It is going to make it a lot easier to get from point A to point B, whether it's on the bus or, as Christina mentioned, with the pedestrian and bicycle connections that we'll have. If you're a bike rider, if you've ever tried to cross 494, it's a massive barrier, north-south bicycle travel. And this will give us an opportunity to make that connection. And then it will improve access to employees for Bloomington businesses as well. So it's certainly a big picture. It's a regional benefit, but it will benefit Bloomington businesses and residents as well. And we really are looking at it in that way. I'm going to turn it over now to Glenn Markegard here. He's going to talk about how the city plans to capitalize on the Orange Line and other investments in the Penn American District.
All right. Thank you, Tim, and good morning. We've talked a lot about transportation investments, and we have another big one on the way. Christina mentioned that, which is the rebuild of the 35W 494 interchange. MnDOT's currently working on plans, and this is an early version of those plans. The project does not have funding today. However, this plan allows the project to be phased. So by breaking it into pieces, that makes it more likely that it could be funded in the future. The first phase would be this northbound to westbound move, and that is the most congested single movement today. So this is City of Bloomington's number one transportation priority. It's the 494 Corridor Commission's number one transportation priority, 35W Solutions Alliance, number one priority. So there's a lot of momentum behind this, and we hope to have funding in the future. Another major investment would be this American Boulevard BRT system. So that would connect east-west across Bloomington, follow American Boulevard, and then hop on 494 out to Eden Prairie. This is farther in the future and would connect our very dense employment corridor in Bloomington with transit, specifically north-south transit. So connecting to the existing Blue Line LRT, the existing Red Line BRT, future Orange Line BRT, and future Green Line LRT. So once in place, Bloomington will have excellent access to transit. So these three really significant investments all converge at the Penn American area. And Councilmember Bussey talked about how Bloomington in the past has built on these transportation investments. We've capitalized on them through planning and zoning. And we're planning to do the same thing in the Penn American area. Just in January, the City Council adopted the Penn American District Plan. And again, capitalizing on those transportation investments. So some of the key features of the plan, higher development intensities, more diversified mix of land uses. We have predominantly retail in the area today, but adding residential, adding hotel, adding more office to the area, and then certainly keeping our retail strong and even adding more. Having smaller blocks, improved accessibility, more attractive, desirable neighborhood in general. So high-intensity development is not new to the area. It's wanted to be in this area for some time. A good example of that is the South Point office tower, successful 15-story Class A office building. Certainly the Best Buy is another example. I believe there's over 1.5 million square feet of office. And then the Meridian Crossings development, again, a Class A office building right at the intersection of 494 and 35W. So the markets wanted to be here in the past without transit, and we think with transit that would just strengthen quite a bit. A very good example of our vision for the area is the Genesee development, which I'm sure you've all seen on Penn Avenue. 234 units of rental housing, ground floor retail, 14,000 square feet. The developers' expectations were exceeded at least much quicker than anticipated, the residential did, and the developer has very good news to report on the retail space as well.
Were those apartments or condos?
They are apartments. They're all rental. There's a few of them are townhomes, 2-story townhomes. Most are 1-story apartments, but they're all for rent. And then coming soon is additional development right on the corner of Penn and American. This is the Home Suites, or Home 2 Suites by Hilton. This is 5-story hotel, 108 rooms. On the ground level, they would have unaffiliated 200-seat restaurant, and then adding another 9,000 square feet of retail uses. This is the same development group that developed Genesee next door. And then also coming this year, the Fresh Time grocery. This is a 28,000 square foot grocery store. Fresh Time is new to the Twin Cities market. This will be the first Twin Cities location, and they chose the Penn American District. They specialize in fresh and natural foods and should be a strong amenity for the area. And we know there's continued market interest beyond these developments. We continue to meet with developers And we also know that there is strong interest from residents in the neighborhood. We've heard from several residents that are very excited about the vision, excited about the future for this area. So our vision is not only to capitalize on transit proximity, clearly we want to do that, but we also want this district to serve as an amenity to the surrounding area, the residential area, and to add value to those residences. So we understand that transit investments could easily be made in other cities. We're very happy to have Metro Transit and Metropolitan Council as a partner in MnDOT, and one of the reasons that they are attracted to Bloomington, I think, is the fact that we have a compelling vision in place, and they know that if they make that investment, the city will take advantage of it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve Elkins, our Metropolitan Council representative.
Don't have any slides. I'll see if I can bring it home. I was reviewing these guys' slides last night. I started getting reminiscent because I realized that I've been working on both sides of this plan since the late 1990s when first started working on this. Neil Peterson, former mayor of Bloomington, was our Met Council representative. I was a planning commissioner in Bloomington. It wasn't even on the city council yet, and was a member of the Met Council Transportation Advisory Board. So we get this going in 2019 as we plan. It will have been over 20 years that I've been working on this project, both the land use side and the transportation side by the time it gets done. And from the Met Council point of view, we're just redoing all of our regional planning documents this year. We just released the first public comment draft of the overall regional blueprint document called Thrive 2040, and you can review that on the Met Council's website, and the public comment period for that extends into, I think, late April. But one of the big themes that we're promoting with this round of planning documents is planning across planning discipline silos. Integration of planning is one of our big buzzwords, and a big focus for us is creating regional plans that facilitate the better coordination of transportation and land use planning together to leverage our investments in transportation infrastructure for economic development around the region. And so one of the things that is so heartwarming for me is to see Bloomington, Metro Transit, Met Council all working together so closely to do exactly that. Because completely in parallel and in coordination, we've been doing the transit plans for this area, the highway plans for this area, and the land use plans for this area, and it's all coming together at the same time right now. This is also a very cost-effective investment for us. So, rough estimates for Southwest LRT, for example, are around $1.5 billion. Our projected, capital cost to finish building out the Orange Line is $150 million, so 1/10 of that. And for that investment, between the ridership that we're projecting for the Orange Line and the existing express bus service in 35W, a lot of people don't know this, but we actually will be delivering more commuters into downtown Minneapolis on 35W with these bus services than we do on Hiawatha on the train. So I see this as a model for leveraging investments in cost-effective transit for the benefit of the whole region and for the city of Bloomington in particular. And that's pretty much what I want to say. I know we want to leave a lot of time for questions here, but that's the big thing for me is that I think that this is a really good case study for effective coordination of investment in transportation and redevelopment. This afternoon I've got to go to one of my many working groups. We have a joint working group of the members of the Met Council Transportation Policy Plan Work Group and the Met Council Thrive 2040 group, Work Group this afternoon at the end of the day. We're talking specifically about how we're going to make sure that our regional plans for transportation and regional plans for housing and land use are well integrated.
Let's open it up and have a conversation. I'm just going to stand here and point, and why don't you start, Ken?
Hi. Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you being here today. And I'm Ken with Kraus Anderson. We own the Southtown Shopping Center, and that includes the Lucky 13 pad site and the Mitsubishi pad site, kind of to the east of Southtown proper. And we've been real involved with, Metro Transit regarding this project. And even with that, Steve mentions that it goes back, 20 years overall about some of the planning. I've been involved with Kraus Anderson for 15 years, and I never heard of anything like a line coming through at Knox Avenue going under 494 until last year. And at that point, I was told, well, it's kind of a pipe dream, $70 million tunnel going underneath 494. So there's been a lot of confusion as far as what it actually is going through the Southtown and going up under or whatever 494. And as recently, I think as back in December at Planning Commission, it was stated that it was going to be at ground level. And again, there's confusion on what that's going to be. The understanding is that it's going to be about a 300-foot trench through Southtown. So if you're at Lucky 13 at the start of their property to 494, there's going to be the downgrade so you can get 20 feet under 494 and then go under 494 and come back up on the other side of Best Buy. So just to kind of confirm that, and so to be a little bit of a devil's advocate on this thing, when you talk about the cost, and that's where, things kind of get thrown around and nobody really knows where it's at. And I think that's what's happening here. And we feel like we're, in a way, being railroaded on this project, reading the tea leaves and all that type of stuff. And I still want to just throw out there, the option is to still have your transit stations on both sides, on American Boulevard and over on the Best Buy side, but utilize Penn Avenue, which is already there. The bridge was redone, back in the early 2000s. And, it may take a little bit longer, but it's not going to be the $30 million for the transit only. And I still don't know, if that includes the cost to try and get under 494 and, all the other costs. It doesn't include costs to condemnate our land. Again, very expensive land for the region. And, there's a lot of additional costs, whereas you already have a route to get to the other side, and it would save the taxpayers, if you're saying 30, you're probably talking, 60 or $70 million. So it's kind of a confusion on what this all means and where the status is at. Yep.
I think you want to start with why not Penn, and we can go from there.
So we've talked a lot about sort of what this might look like, the idea of going under 494, and the engineers actually working on the interchange design were able to develop a layout that actually was shown in Glenn's, but we'll.
You want?
No, this is good. We'll stick with this.
All
one.
right, fine.
And they assumed a certain grade that gives you that 300-foot distance. We could go steeper than that and have a shorter distance for sort of an underpass. And we're calling it kind of an at-grade underpass, which if you think about, I know we've talked about American Boulevard under 77 as maybe I don't know where Jim Gates is. I know we've talked about that as kind of a similar situation where the street American Boulevard is at grade, but it's going under the freeway. So the freeway is on bridges at that point.
You're talking Knox or American Boulevard?
I'm talking American Boulevard under Highway 77.
Oh, okay.
So in case people are sort of familiar with that area. So that's kind of what I mean when I say at-grade underpass. Obviously this would have more grade as it goes under the bridge. It would dip down and then come back up on the Richfield side. But I think that there's a lot of different ways that we could do that. We've talked a little bit with Kraus Anderson about a situation where we've done that in St. Paul behind the Capitol, and it's actually built today. And they did it with a series of sort of terraced the sidewalks and the retaining wall, so it doesn't actually feel like a trench. It's more it's more open than that. That's something that we can go out and look at. It's a similar grade to what Knox Avenue could be. We also, I think, are trying to think really kind of out of the box on how you integrate the development and potentially the parking structure with this underpass. So, you know, at Target Field, we've built on-ramp to the freeway underneath Target Field and underneath the parking ramp, and it's a very seamless situation for pedestrians crossing 3rd Avenue, but it's also functional from a transportation perspective. So I think there's a lot of different ways we can address the sort of the issues of bisecting the site with something that actually maybe brings it together, whether it's using sort of the building over the top of that to connect development on both sides, or whether it's using pedestrian bridging, things like that. So I think that it's sort of more of a design issue. We have talked about Penn Avenue today between thank you. So today between 98th Street and 76th Street, we go through 14 traffic lights on Penn Avenue, and I'm sure you've all done it at rush hour, try to get sort of down or up that stretch. And really what that translates to is delay and a lack of reliability for our buses. And so that's the big issue with Penn, is that we're out there in mixed traffic competing with every other vehicle, and it makes it difficult to stay on a schedule. Knox Avenue would be a more, because it's much lower volume, it would be an opportunity where we could have a more dedicated presence and be able to maintain our reliability. What else did we talk about? Oh, on this sheet, you'll see the cost estimates. Those do include all of the bridging, underpass, relocating a storm sewer that's under Knox Avenue, alignment, the 42-inch storm sewer. Is that right? Water main, sorry, not an engineer. This $30 million does not include right-of-way costs. So as you mentioned, that's a significant item. The $36 million also does not include right-of-way costs. So as I said before, sort of the idea of pushing putting the station in the middle and expanding outwards also has significant impacts to property. So just a couple things. I don't know if other people want to jump in or have other things to add.
You know, on the handout, it points out that the estimated travel time with either the online or the Knox Avenue alignment through here is about half what it is with currently with the Penn Avenue alignment.
I think that's a big question, and thank you for asking it, Ken. Let's we could probably spend a long time on that, and there'll be other conversations. So let's hear. Yeah.
Regardless of what the total cost ends up being, who's paying for what?
Oh, I can address that because staff put together the numbers for me. So for the capital cost, the assumption is that about half of it would be funded with a federal Small Starts grant. So Small Starts is a funding program for transit projects that are less than about $200 million, I think. Yeah, and so this with it at $150 million, this falls within that category. It's much less oversubscribed than the New Starts program that's used to fund rail transit projects. So we think our prospects of getting that grant are very good, and in fact, in the Federal Transit Administration's grant criteria for this program, the economic development potential is a big chunk of the points awarded for awarding these grants. And so our partnership with the city to put the Penn American District Plan into place, put the associated zoning into place, is actually a big part of our application to the federal government to receive that grant. 30% of the capital funding would come from the county's Transportation Improvement Board. That's the body that administers the quarter-cent sales tax in the region. We're anticipating 10% of the funding coming from Hennepin and Dakota counties. And then the state and Met Council would be the remaining 10% of the capital. So the mix is typical of transit projects in the region, including rail transit in terms of the funding sources. And then in terms of operating, it'd be about half Met Council, half of the subsidy from the Met Council, about a third from Met Council, about a third from the county's Transit Improvement Board, the quarter-cent sales tax again, and then the remainder would be at least 30% coming out of the fare box, which is also typical for bus transit in the region.
Yeah.
Maybe I could ask that a little differently. What would be the cost to the city of Bloomington?
Minimal, but I mean, there's.
Yeah. So what's typically done in other transit projects, so Central Quarter of the Green Line is a good example, is that the city of St. Paul chose to do streetscape improvements and some utility relocation at the same time. Obviously, there's a cost savings in coordinating construction, and that was sort of an elective by the city and timed for construction. But as far as the actual, the $957 million light rail project, the city did not have a share in that. So it's really, it's more of up to sort of the municipality. Do you want to have enhancements that are done at a similar time?
And I think that's a fair representation. Obviously the construction, the operation will be with the CTIB, Met Transit, and fare boxes and so on. I think from a city perspective, we'd look at enhancements, improvements, whether it's trying to expand and improve on bus shelters or trying to do streetscape improvements or so on. It's so far out right now, I don't think we really don't have a grip on exactly what that would be, and those are all options for the future. It's not a specific dollar amount that we have earmarked right now that it's going to happen. It's likely that it could, but it would be the decision of the council if and when this is constructed.
A good example of what Christina's talking about a project that might make sense to do in coordination. There's a stormwater issue right at Knox and American Boulevard, and it might make sense for the city to address that at the same time that the work is being done for the transit. So that's a great example of the kind of opportunity that it creates for city improvements.
In the back.
Bill Griffith, I've represented a number of the landowners in the district, and some of whom are in the room. One of the questions I asked the City Council when they adopted a development moratorium on the district is, and this can also go to Met Council, Met Transit, has there been any study to demonstrate that this, what currently, based on the public comments, the minimum density zoning, the mandatory 2 stories that come in the district, has it been demonstrated on a market basis that there's a actually viable market in the foreseeable future? Because we've been told many times, and I think it was just mentioned today, how the zoning and the transit funding are so carefully linked, or it's so important to score well with FTA and others. And what we haven't seen, at least I haven't seen, is a demonstration that there's a reasonably foreseeable market for this type of development. We see South Point, and that's a multi-story building, but the city did not have a minimum density on South Point. What they allowed was, I think, 1.0 floor area ratio, and then when the market was able to supply that type of density, it came along and South Point was built. Similarly, in other areas, the office building that I reside in, Wells Fargo Plaza, 1.0 floor area ratio. When the market was there, the building was built. There wasn't a minimum density requirement, there was a maximum, a cap, if you will. And I have not seen any statement that there's going to be a market study, either as part of the environmental review process or otherwise, to demonstrate that these fairly prescriptive zoning requirements that are, by everybody's statement, necessary for the transit-oriented development actually will result in development that isn't subsidized heavily by the public authorities. I'm going to just take one more minute to analogize to a study in the mid-90s, and Councilmember Elkins may remember this. The Builders Association challenged the Met Council's underlying assumptions about available buildable land. And the 2 parties, the Met Council and the Builders Association, went together to study actually how much land there was in the MUSA. The Met Council had one number, the builders had another, but when you started to strip away wetlands and erodible soils and steep slopes and sensitive ag land, there was actually a lot less supply. And I think similarly, in this transit-oriented development, the missing piece that I see is there really a market that my clients can rely on to build, minimum density and 2 stories? And so I haven't heard yet that study's been ordered, but I think it's essential.
City? I think that goes to you first.
I can address that. In terms of the market, I guess, what do we know? We know that Genesee tested the apartment market. That was very successful. So we know the apartment market is strong in that area. We know that United Properties, through their Applewood Point development, tested the senior market in the area, and that was a very successful project. So we know that market is strong. We have on the way hotel development. So developer closely analyzed the market, determined whether or not they thought the market was there. They're planning to build a hotel. The developer that's recently added retail to the area is adding more retail. We know that Southtown is interested in adding more retail in the area. We know that a major grocery store, Fresh Time, is moving into the area. They analyze the market. They think Penn American is a place to be. We're talking to other developers that want to develop multifamily housing in the district, senior housing in the district, potentially hotels. So we feel like the market is definitely strong in the area.
Mr. Moderator, just one follow-up question, maybe more a point than a question. Every one of those projects that you've identified that has actually been built, other than Applewood Point, has been subsidized with city tax increment financing dollars. So if you're telling me that TIF is available for every one of the property owners in that district, that's great news. I don't think that's the case.
Just to follow up on that, there's been a number of developments in the district that have proceeded without public funding. Applewood Point, South Point Office Tower, Meridian Crossings. The market is strong. It's wanted to be in this area for a number of years. We don't think that will change in the future, especially with the transit investments.
So the responsibility of the moderator is on the one hand to allow this sort of back and forth, but on the other to make sure that we've opened all the subjects that are maybe out there just to get a taste of them. So we've got why this route, some of the development and market demand questions. Is there another subject which people wanted to broach or hear about?
Yeah. Robert Freeman from Belfast. Can you talk more about kind of the pedestrianization, what the two different, so it sounds like the folks who are the decision makers that kind of trying to decide between these two options. Can you talk about what the benefit is for pedestrians, and you talk about bikes a little bit, but we didn't really get further into that. I'm really interested in knowing. I mean, you talk about Best Buy, but other than the people who are working at Best Buy, what about the people who live and presumably are going to be funding the city and the city's portion of responsibilities in this? What about those pedestrians who live around those, and how do those change for those folks?
Sure. So today, I don't know where our pointer went. Somebody? Okay. Thank you. So one of the big discussions with these various routes is that if you place a station here, and you can imagine people might walk about 10 minutes to get to a station. That's actually less than what people walk in our region generally. But a 10-minute, half-mile walk. You get a walk shed that's basically like this, because of course there's no way to get north-south across 494 between Penn and Lyndale. Once we started looking at this, now you can capture people in this area. You can also capture riders up here. You sort of double your walk shed, and you reach both sides of the freeway, which we think is really important. And then you also create a seamless pedestrian connection here that, unlike, has anybody ever walked? Has anybody ever walked on Penn from here to here? They are braver than I am. I have never done it. I had to go up here, and I took a bus. I waited at a bus stop and took it like 2 blocks because I don't feel safe out there. It's built for moving cars, and it does that well. But I think Knox Avenue is an opportunity to think about everyone who's not in a car and think about how transportation could change in this area if people had choices. So, you know, one of the things that we recognize is that cars aren't going away. There's still going to be the need to move traffic in and out of Penn Avenue and Lyndale and onto 494 and onto 35W. But we also want to provide people with choices so they don't feel like in order to live in this area you have to have a car. And that's where we see kind of the diversification of the market and people who maybe want to live in an apartment and be able to walk to a Starbucks or hop on a bus and go downtown for their job and not have to pay for parking, things like that. So I think there's some significant pedestrian benefits.
May I exercise the prerogative of asking a really dumb question?
Yeah.
And this will just reveal that I don't know that much about this project overall, but was it a bridge looked at rather than a tunnel? It wouldn't necessarily
Yes.
avoid the, but
Yep. A bridge would take more distance to get
Yeah.
up and over the 494, and so we really have been pursuing the underpass option because it's has a smaller footprint.
gotcha.
Mhm.
Can I just add on?
Please do, yeah.
Point out from a biking point of view. So on the Richfield side of the border, there's a major, one of the best east-west bikeways in the region runs like this. And then on the Bloomington side, it would be off the map, 86th Street is a major east-west bikeway. But there are very, very few places to safely cross 494 anywhere in here. When I do it, I usually go all the way over to Xerxes, is the only safe place in this general area to do it. So, you know, being able to connect this bikeway and the bikeway down here on 86th Street would be a major amenity for people who are commuting by bike.
We want to run a tight ship. Last maybe question, yeah?
I don't bike and I don't walk any great distance. When I drive, when the new ramp on the interchange there is, when the new ramps are in, and when that below grade underpass is done, and I go over to Lucky's, where am I going to park?
So this is a good question actually, because one of the things that we want to try and do through the design work and working with Cross Anderson is to minimize the amount of surface parking that's removed. Obviously we're planning on building a parking facility somewhere in this vicinity. We know that there are parking needs, especially if there's additional development as sort of planned. So I think we've also been thinking about how can a park and ride serving commuters some times a day also serve the businesses and the retail and sort of increase the parking capacity in the area as a whole. And so there's kind of a spectrum. It could be anything from sort of joint use parking facility all the way up to, you know, the parking facility has retail on top of it or something like that. So the answer is we're really looking at how to reduce any impacts to parking. And I think, again, through the design, we have the property owners at the table. We can really work through those issues and try to create some benefit for people in this area and development that's coming to this area.
So thank you to Bloomington Chamber and its members and board members, and to the Met Council on Transit and the city for coming. Obviously, an enormous number of very important conversations continuing. I know that everyone up front would like to continue to hear from you, so I don't even have to ask them if I know they would. And with that, thank you all for coming very, very much.